Howdy. Today we are working on a Chevy Traverse 3.6 liter. It's got some timing issues because it is a Chevy Traverse with a 3.6 liter. That is the way it goes. But today we're not talking about the engine. We are talking about this. I just want to tell you guys real quick how I keep my fasteners, how I keep those organized, how I make it easy on myself going back together later on. Because this is not going back together today. This will be here for a minute now. I do this on pretty much all larger jobs, especially jobs I'm not too familiar with, or that are going to be apart more than one day, or that are just, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Now this has a few advantages to this. For one, obviously, as you can see, all the bolts are labeled where they go. So you're not going to get, they're not all in a pile or whatever, when you're trying to figure out what bolt goes to what component. Everything is right here, and it's really easy. I just poke holes in the box with a screwdriver, stick the bolts in as I remove them, label it where they go, draw a box around it. Okay, that's that component. We're good to go. On to the next thing. It takes a little bit of extra time during teardown, but it saves a lot of time going back together, and I think it is very worth it in most cases. Now, the other advantage of this is that everything is in order. And so if you label everything in the order that you take it apart, and then when you're ready to go back together, you just follow that order backwards, you're not going to get stuck. So like for instance, on this engine, I believe the belt tensioner has to be removed after the alternator because one of the bolts is behind an idler pulley that's attached to the alternator. Which means that when I go back together with it, if I were to just say, okay, I'm going to install the alternator now, and I hadn't put the belt tensioner on yet, I would end up having to remove the alternator again so that I could, well, maybe not remove the whole, well, actually, yeah, I would have to remove the whole alternator again so that I can put that belt tensioner on and then put the alternator back on. When you just follow it backwards like this and everything is in the order that you took it apart, you can't get tripped up like that. Because if it can come apart this way, it can go back together that way. You're not gonna put yourself in a corner or anything. The other thing that you can do with this, because this is all I've done for this so far, but there's a ton of flexibility to doing it like this. For one thing, okay, obvious question, what do you do for nuts? Because you're not gonna, obviously the box can't hold nuts like it can hold bolts. All I do there is, so like let's say this fuse box, it's held on by one bolt and two nuts. I just put the nuts on the studs. So we have one nut there, one nut there. If it were only held on by nuts, I would just put the nuts on the studs, like I said, and then I would still make this box anyway. And I would just label it fuse box, nuts. And then I would know, okay, that's the order it goes in. I'm not looking for any bolts, it's just the nuts that are on the studs where it goes. No issue there. I still know where everything's at and I know what order it goes together in. The next thing you can do is you can make boxes for anything really, for wires, connectors, for hoses, anything like that. You can label it if it's important, if you think it's something that you might get tripped up with putting it back together in the right order. If you're not sure what to call a connector, like if you're not, depending on your level of experience or whatever. I mean, you could be getting into big jobs and not necessarily have to know what every single component is called. But a real easy thing to do is just take some masking tape. Let's say you want to call this connector A, and you remove it between such and such two different steps. Okay, so just take a piece of masking tape, put it around there, A on there, and then just draw a box, connector A. Or with your power steering hoses, you can just draw a box, power steering hoses, whatever, and now that's the order that it goes in, and you're not going to end up having to remove components so that you can put stuff together and then put those components back on while you're trying to get this thing reassembled. I think that is pretty much all there is to it. I haven't done any of that in here. I've actually been into these motors a few times. It's not my first time dealing with this, so and actually very recently too. So I've got a good idea of the connectors and hoses and everything like that. It wasn't really worth it to me to label those, but that is something that I'll definitely do on projects that are a little newer to me, engines that are not as familiar, stuff like that definitely gets labeled. I think that is about it. But yeah, this is just a great system. There's not a tray of bolts that you're gonna spill, no looking through bolts to figure out, try to remember which one goes to what component, no putting stuff together in the wrong order and having to take it back apart. It makes things very, very, very smooth and way more painless, less stressful, just happier all around, a lot happier to work on. Which, when it comes to engines like this, you take all the help you can get. So that's about it. Y'all have a good one.